Go back to federal parliament now. Senators Eric Abetz and Michael Ronaldson there to comment on the Fair Work Australia hearing this morning.
Closer, thank you. After 3.5 hours of questioning of Fair Work Australia this morning, it's become quite apparent that the tsunami of straw men that Craig Thomson tried to serve up in his parliamentary statement have been well and truly blown away. Last week we saw that the Australian Electoral Commission completely debunked Mr Thomson's assertions that in some way it derogated from the Fair Work Australia report. Today we had confirmation that the suggestion of this phone hacking was one of recent invention that was only put to Fair Work Australia after they had sent draft findings to him, and the Labor-funded lawyers holding Redlick then sent in that submission suggesting that phone hacking may have occurred without providing any real evidence that it occurred. Further, we heard from Fair Work Australia this morning that the allegations against 2 senior officers have been completely and utterly dismissed by Fair Work Australia, and so the deconstruction of Mr Thomson's arguments continues. The right of entry suggestion that for him to exercise a right of entry he would need to provide his driver's licence. Fair Work Australia have told us this morning that is not so. So we have all these straw men that were served up to us blown away by the government authority set up by Labor and the officials appointed by Labor in Fair Work Australia, absolutely blowing Mr Thomson's cover. The time has now come for the Parliament to consider whether this serial misleading of the Parliament is something that the House of Representatives is willing to tolerate on an ongoing basis. The misleading of the Parliament is an important matter for the Parliament to consider. Let's not forget, from time to time, members of Parliament are suspended for simply interjecting. One wonders why, when you have found to serially and seriously misled the Parliament, why something of that nature should not also occur to a parliamentarian. I'll allow Senator Ronaldson to make some comments and then we'll both take questions.
Well, look, very quickly, after 3.5 years, it was only on the 2nd of March this year that Holding Redlick wrote to Fair Work Australia with the ruse of potential evidence from Mr Stuart Robinson, no statutory declarations, no evidence at all to back it up, and of course Mr Robinson himself has vehemently denied or refuses to make any comment, and both Fagan and Hill, others who allegedly should have been interviewed, of course have also said they know nothing about these threats. This is absolutely another story that's been blown away, and Mr Thomson now has further very serious questions to answer given his evidence in the House of Representatives last week.
Mr Thomson also told the House of Representatives last week that all the matters in the Fair Work Australia report dealt with issues before he was a member of the Parliament. In fact, the report discloses 15 separate credit card transactions that were in fact transacted whilst he was a member of the Parliament using HSU members' money. When that allegation was put to him, Mr Thomson promised that he would come back to Fair Work Australia on notice. I specifically asked, as of today, had he come back to them with any information dealing with those 15 allegations, and the answer was no. He had a full hour in the Parliament last week to explain those transactions. Instead, he threw up all the straw men under the sun to try to obfuscate, but didn't deal with it, and he still hasn't dealt with it. These are matters that are very concerning, given this is a Member of Parliament making assertions, false and misleading assertions, to Fair Work Australia.
Can I just confirm that the Bolano matters were not raised at all again until the 2nd of March, and indeed that was despite clear evidence today of a number of text messages to Fair Work Australia officials, a number of interviews with Fair Work Australia officials, and a number of emails with Fair Work Australia officials.
What do you expect the House of Representatives to do right now then?
It is up to the House of Representatives to determine what it does with a member that is now clearly on the record as having misled the House of Representatives in a a whole range of areas that simply cannot be disputed, and misleading of the House is not something that a judge or anybody else determines. The behaviour and the standards for members of Parliament are in fact determined by the Parliament, and that is why people regularly, especially in the other place, get turfed out for interjecting too much. I would have thought most Australians would come to the conclusion that whilst interjecting too much is not a good look, it is a lot worse a look to provide misinformation and false information to the House, sentence after sentence after sentence, as Mr Thompson did.
So what do you want the Privileges Committee to do? Do you want them to expedite their investigation into whether he misled Parliament?
Today, the Privileges Committee will have before it a whole further tranche of evidence confirming that Mr Thompson misled the House of Representatives in his statement last week, and they are clearly matters that the independents now need to consider. It is no longer good enough for them to suggest that this is a matter for police or a judge and jury to work out. These are matters that specifically go to the heart of the running of the Parliament, and the Parliament is the master of its own destiny in relation to that.
Would it not have been preferable for Mr Nassios to have appeared in person, given he was the one who oversaw this investigation? He seems to have gone on extended leave.
It is a matter of great regret that, first of all, the parliamentary secretary that was obfuscating last time at Senate estimates was not in the chair. The former general manager has been denied to the committee to give evidence, and of course Mr Nassios similarly has been denied to the committee. Mr Nassios should have been asked to come along to Senate estimates. Fair Work Australia is able to manage his leave. They deferred his leave until such time as the report had been completed. It would not have been asking too much, given that substantial deferral, to ask for a few months so that he could appear before Senate estimates. The reality is Mr Nassios will not be available for questioning now until February 2013 estimates, and clearly that is far too long a gap.
Senator Abetz, President Ross didn't really give a glowing endorsement of Mr Nassios. He basically just said that will be a matter for the federal court to look at as far as whether he conducted a fair inquiry. Do you stand by Mr Nassios's work?
It is not for us to make comments on that, and thank you for reminding me that at the very beginning of the hearing, Minister Ludwig, on behalf of the government, yet again refused to express confidence in Fair Work Australia's findings in relation to Mr Thompson. Willing to say they've got confidence in Fair Work Australia, but not willing to say in relation to the report that they have full confidence, nor were they willing to say which findings did they have confidence in and which findings they didn't have confidence in. Now, Mr Nassios, it became clear during the hearing, whilst he was the overseer of the investigation, it appears that somebody else was heavily involved, and that was Ms Carruthers. And she gave her evidence.
It's also important to remember that Ms O'Neill today, the acting general manager, made it quite clear when asked questions that she constantly referred back to the Fair Work report, and that was to stand as Fair Work's example of where the report was. So there was no questioning from her at all. She made it quite clear that they stood by their report.
And also, if I might say, in relation to Mr Ross did make it clear in his opening statement, and also later on in the evidence, that there was a distinction to be drawn, that he was responsible for the tribunal members and staff, but Ms O'Neill was responsible for Mr Nassios and the administrative staff, and that is why it would be absolutely wrong to suggest that Mr Ross in some way did not give a full and glowing endorsement of Mr Nassios. He just quite properly sidestepped the issue because it was up to Ms O'Neill to answer that particular question, and her evidence and that of Ms Carruthers was absolutely clear that there was no suggestion, no hint of bias or trying to fiddle the outcomes.
In light of there being possible missed credit card transactions used for escorts, do you think Fair Work Australia should reopen their investigation? Or
Fair Work Australia are considering the matter, given what one media outlet has discovered, that one credit card transaction, which on the face of it would not suggest an escort agency, when the company searches revealed that that is what the transaction was all about. So Fair Work Australia, in fairness, have said they will look at that and determine whether or not they should reopen.
What do you make of Mr Ross's assertion that Fair Work's reputation has been tarnished as a result of this investigation, and the administrative arm of the organisation, there should be a name change for it?
There is no doubt that Fair Work Australia's reputation has been tarnished by the Thompson saga, and as I volunteered, I think Mr Ross's suggestion is a good one. We as a coalition have not finalised our thinking on that, but I think it is worthy of genuine consideration.
But Senator Abetz, you say the government hasn't expressed its full confidence in Fair Work Australia, but you now are expressing confidence in Fair Work Australia, are you?
I'm expressing confidence in the robustness of Fair Work Australia's report into the HSU National Office, and let's not forget, Fair Work Australia was Labor's creation, Labor's legislation. Labor appointed all the personnel, and it's passing strange that Labor, having had this ownership of Fair Work Australia from day one to now, is not willing to express confidence in its own creation. I think that says a lot.
Senator, just to clarify...
OK, we'll have to leave that there. That was Liberal Senators Eric Abetz and Michael Ronaldson live from Parliament House in Canberra. They were speaking after that estimates hearing this morning involving Fair Work Australia. Senators Abetz and Ronaldson say it is clear now that crossbench MP Craig Thompson has misled Parliament on several different issues in relation to allegations that he misused union funds when he was a union official. Craig Thompson is denying any wrongdoing.